Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into my talk. My name is Catherine Gallagher. I'm a postdoc at Stony Brook University, and today I'm going to be sharing some preliminary work on a project that I've been working on, quantifying potential plastic pathways and sources along the West Antarctic Peninsula. Unfortunately, as we are all aware, plastic pollution is a problem throughout the world, and especially in ocean environments. This is an image from a recent story where they looked at albatross on Midway Island and found them full of trash. And we thought Antarctica was sort of immune to this because of its isolation and the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. But however, that isn't necessarily the case, especially in the past 5 years or so. There's been a large influx of new reports and papers, a subset of which are shown here, illustrating that microplastic contamination and macroplastic contamination is more common in the Antarctic than we previously thought. And so there's a real need to understand where these plastics might be coming from. And that is what we attempted to do here in this project. We used a physical ocean model, the Regional Ocean Modeling System ROMS, developed at Old Dominion University for the West Antarctic Peninsula specifically. And we used the drifters in that model to simulate plastics. We used surface-locked drifters, and we simulated these drifters in both a non-point source pollution, so sort of the background concentration of what might already be present. And then we also looked at point source pollution from human activity. The array of plastics that we released across our several different simulations are shown here on the right. The orange, green, and purple dots illustrate that background sort of concentration of plastics that we think are already in the environment that might have come into this region from elsewhere. And then all of the small black dots at varying concentrations illustrate the point source pollution from human activity that we considered. And we use visitation data from IATO, based on the tourism industry, to make these estimates on high human activity. We also use plastics observations from both the Southern Ocean Observing System, or SOOS, and the Palmer LTER for observations of plastics, and use these simulated plastic tracks to see where these observed plastics might have potentially come from. So to get right into our results, here we have a two-panel map. On the left is our plastics represent simulations of that non-point source pollution, sort of those background concentrations from off the continental shelf and in the coastal Bellingshausen and Weddell Seas. And on the right, we have the results from our point source pollution simulations. The green dots on both of these figures illustrate observed plastics from SOOS and the LTER. And then the colored dots ranging from yellow to this dark purple color on a log scale represent the number of particles that got close to those observed plastics that are, and those points illustrate the origin or the approximate origin of those plastics. And what we see here on the tip of the peninsula is that some plastics may come from the Weddell Sea, but we also get a lot more plastics coming from point source pollution / human activity. As we continue through several different regions where the plastics are observed, as we start to move into the South Shetland Islands, we see the same sort of pattern. We now see input from the continental shelf region, but we also see much more input by simply means of proximity by human activity. This pattern continues in the Palmer / Gerlache Strait region. We do see a bit more input from the continental shelf here because of the proximity to the troughs and trenches that move water inshore. But again, we see a lot more input from those coastal pollution areas. We would look at the few observations of plastics off the continental shelf. Obviously, those primarily come from the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, but there's not a lot of export off the continental shelf from these point source pollution regions. So again, this is super preliminary. We are still working on this, but what we see is that the human impacts really here are astronomical, and there's a huge potential for these plastics to impact animals, as we're already seeing from some of the literature I highlighted earlier. So it is very likely that these observed plastics came from this human activity, and we need to start looking at where plastics might be concentrated, but then also what penguin colonies are at greatest risk for impact. And this is my contact information, and thank you for your time.